Hey, so in this video we're going to be looking at the economic objectives of a consumer. I won't do an introduction as I did that in the previous video, which was on producers, so check that out if you have not yet. But okay, so we're thinking of what will we assume about a consumer, what do they want to make decisions in order to maximize, and what if they do that we can say that they are rational. So for consumers we say that they want to maximize their utility, and I've discussed in my utility maximization video that our utility we can just view as sort of happiness or satisfaction or any sort of utility, and we should know what the word utility means. So they want to maximize this, but it's sort of an arbitrary concept that how does a consumer get utility, and maybe more precisely, how do we measure this? So how do we compare the utility that somebody gets from consuming an ice cream versus how much they get for going and watching a film? Which do they prefer? And how do all of the infinitely many choices a consumer can make, how can these be represented in a utility function? So I've got a point here saying that utility can come from anything, so anything that a consumer does, they can get some level of utility, or they can have negative utility. Say if they have to work an hour and they don't get anything back from that hour, we'll say that they will likely have negative utility from that, assuming they don't like their job. So everything a consumer does can impact their utility. So every single decision a consumer makes, we're assuming, is in order to maximize their sort of happiness or their utility function. And so how we approximate this as economists in order to decide what the exact objective of a consumer is, why they are making the decisions they're making, we can make a simple utility function containing all the goods that a consumer might consume and also their leisure time. So for example, we can have a very simple utility function where our utility is just given by u, and we could say, let's assume that there's only one good that a consumer can consume, x, and so the more of this they consume, the more utility they get, and we're going to raise that to the power of half. And the other thing that consumers can consume is leisure time, and we can raise that to the power half. And this is just a very simple utility function. And so what we say from this function is that the more goods, x, a consumer consumes, if we increase x, we're going to increase the consumer's utility, they increase their utility. And clearly this leisure, lowercase l, if we increase the amount of leisure time somebody has, well, we're also going to be increasing the utility as well, because these terms factor in positively into our utility function. And why do we think of leisure time? Well, we can think that somebody has 24 hours in a day, and for some of those hours they're going to have to be working, and this is labor, and we think of this as capital L, and leisure is lowercase l. So anytime that somebody is not working, we tend to think of that as being equal to our leisure, lowercase l. So that's the final point I put down there. Consumers have to make decisions about how much time to devote to working or supplying labor. And why is this? Well, because in order to consume goods, this x that we have in our utility function, we need to have we need a way of getting income, we need money to buy these goods. So there is a trade-off for consumers, and in order to maximize their utility, they have to decide, okay, I need to work a certain number of hours, but I don't like working. So there's a trade-off there, but the trade-off comes because the return to working is money which can be used to purchase goods. So this is the maximization problem of a consumer. They maximize their utility subject to their budget. So the budget is how much money they get from working, and they can spend that all on goods and holidays and whatever they want. So leisure, they can spend it on. And so this is the economic objective we assume of a consumer. Now, we said that the producer's economic objectives of profit maximizing may be unrealistic, but in my opinion, at least, having this concept of maximizing utility is a very good concept that we can have for consumers, because when we're making decisions, we don't tend to think of ourselves as maximizing some function, but it is effectively what we're doing. We're trying to maximize our happiness with all our decisions. And our happiness doesn't necessarily have to come just from goods and services. We can also, if we're giving a charitable donation, this can come into our utility function, and we gain happiness and utility from donating to charity. And so we could formulate a very good utility function that very accurately maps our preferences as individuals. The problem that we get with this in economics is that it's obviously pretty much impossible to come up with one function that accurately represents all of our preferences. There are infinitely many decisions we make. Almost every day we make so many decisions, and it's impossible pretty much to make this function which accurately represents our preferences. So in economics, as with everything, we have to simplify. And my example here, this very basic utility function, is obviously much more simplified than real life, but what we actually use in economics, and in at least simple economic models, the functions aren't very far away from this functional form. This looks a bit like a Cobb-Douglas utility function, which we'll get onto in the future, but the fact that this has a name shows that we do actually use utility functions something like this, and we do often simplify an economy so that a consumer is only consuming one or two goods, and then we can make decisions between those two goods. It gets a lot more complicated when we have infinitely many goods in our economy. So that is our problem with this economic objective, that the theory is fine, and if we were to spend years and years researching an individual consumer's preferences, then we could theoretically come up with a very good model of their choices, but everyone's different, so we'd have to do this for 7+ billion people on the world if we wanted to accurately represent a whole economy's or the whole planet's preferences. So we don't do this, and this is the problem with this. There always is a problem in economics because we are modeling, so we're simplifying things quite a bit, and we can debate all day about whether that's good or bad, but this is what we tend to assume about a consumer's economic objectives. So that will wrap up this video. Please do leave a like if it was at all useful, subscribe for lots of future videos, and check out the playlist for the past and previous videos on a similar topic to this one.